Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We are about to begin our session, so I'd like to ask everyone to make sure they have their mics muted. Both, can you stop sharing your screen and then we can begin? Good morning, President, Mrs. Mirta Peralta, Dean, Mrs. Salangel Alvarado, esteemed presenters, Mr. William Ashnar, your presenters, Mr. Braden Bradley, Ms. Minette Reyes, SJC faculty, staff, and students. My name is Mrs. Marcia Bulwa, and I will be the MC for the Social Justice Forum 2021. Here are some rules to observe. Muted while the presenters are engaged. We also ask you to keep your cameras on so that we may see you and you can be engaged with us. We ask that you use the chat only for questions pertaining to the Social Justice Forum. And finally, we ask you to be a part of the discussion when it comes to the question and answer segment. So please adhere to these rules, knowing that our session is being recorded and will be shared later on our social media platforms and with other stakeholders. So we ask that we all remain reverent and in respectful mode during our session. Thank you. We now ask that we play our national anthem. The national anthem is being done by the SJC music students under the direction of Mr. Carlos Perote. Let us honor and respect the national anthem. Thank you so much, music students and Mr. Perote, for sharing the national anthem with us on our steel pan instruments. We now call on Miss Jana Kanul to lead us in prayer. Miss Jana Kanul.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's pray. Respectfully offer this prayer in support of all individuals who are enhance awareness and action to promote human rights, safety, and dignity of all. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessings, especially for giving us hope through the crucifixion and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all people are treated justly, for instilling in us the love for all of our neighbors and in all that is good and right, for continuing to give us your grace to live and act with trust and faith in your ultimate plan for all. We pray that you will give us the acute awareness of social justice issues such as fair wages, housing, access to services, right to life, corporal punishment, guardianship, rights of all individuals, especially individuals who are disabled or aged. Pray that you will give us the wisdom and courage to develop and implement policy which is sensitive to these issues and protect the health, safety, and dignity of all. We pray that our dedication to our desire and commitment to stand up for those who cannot stand on their own, and that for strength to be persistent in our daily interactions, to see others with the eyes of Christ and act accordingly. Come, O Holy Spirit, come. Open to us the wonder, beauty, and dignity of diversity found in each culture, each face, and in each experience we have of the other among us. Come fill us with generosity, as we are challenged to let go and allow others to share with us the goods and beauty of the earth. Come heal the divisions that keep us from seeing the face of Christ in all men, women, and children. Come free us to stand with and for those who must leave their own lands to find work, security, and welcome in a new land, one that has enough to share. Come bring us understanding, inspiration, wisdom, and courage needed to embrace change and stay on the journey. Come, O Holy Spirit, show us the way. O Lord, open our eyes that we may see the needs of others. Open our ears that we may hear their cries. Open our hearts so that they need not to be without succor. Let us not be afraid to defend the weak because of the anger of the strong, nor afraid to defend the poor because of the anger of the rich. Show us where love, hope, and faith are needed, and help us to bring them to those places. And so, open our eyes and our ears, that we may this coming activity be able to do some work. I bow to the sacred in all creation. May our spirit fill the world and beauty and wonder. May our minds seek truth with humility and openness. May our heart forgive without limit. May our love for friend, enemy, and outcast be without measure. May our needs be few and my living simple. May our actions bear witness to the suffering of others. May our hands never harm a living being. May our steps on the journey of justice stay on the journey of justice. May our tongue speak for those who are poor without fear of the powerful. May our prayers rise with patient discontent until no child is hungry. May our life's work be a passion for peace and nonviolence. May our soul rejoice in the present moment. May our imagination overcome death and despair with new possibility. Grant us, Lord God, a vision of your world as your love would have it. A world where the weak are protected and none go hungry or poor. A world where the riches of creation are shared and everyone can enjoy them. A world where different races and cultures live in harmony and mutual respect. A world where peace is built with justice and justice is guided. Give us the inspiration and courage to build Jesus Christ. Let us now repeat the litany of peace. God, so many people are in pain. Teach us the way to peace. When people are around us, don't agree and think differently. Teach us to listen and try to understand. When we see people getting hurt, teach us to speak up. When we see people treated poorly because of their skin color or language or religious belief, teach us to be an example of love and acceptance. When we see war and conflict, teach us how to make a difference and seek peace. When we see pain, teach us to bring. When we feel confused and afraid, remind us to talk to our friends or family and to you. In our lives or neighborhoods and the world, teach us to pray and teach us the way. Amen.
Thank you so much, Jana Kano, for sharing that lovely and inspirational prayer, a fitting one for the occasion. We now call the Dean of the College, Mrs. Salantel Alvarado, to give us the welcome address. Mrs. Alvarado?
Thank you, Mrs. Bua. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many faces. And I wish that the others who have their cameras off, if they could turn it on so that we can all see you, right? But it's so good to see many of you that have joined us today for the Social Justice Forum. So I want to begin with a phrase here from Frederick Douglass: where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither person nor property will be safe. Mrs. Mirta Peralta, President of St. John's College, administrators, our presenters for today's session, Mr. William Dawson, Ms. Rihanna Snar, Mr. Braden Bradley, Ms. Minette Vales, faculty members and students. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the annual Social Justice Forum. The Social Justice Forum aims to enlighten our students, and by extension, the faculty and administrators, by selecting dynamic speakers who can engage them in meaningful discussion on issues of social interest. This year's social justice will focus on an issue that has impacted our institution, our communities, and our entire nation. Over the last few months, we have lost 3 of our students as a result of crime and violence. Just like each of us, these innocent students had dreams and had families that care and love them. We are already challenged by the effects of the pandemic. We now have to worry about our safety and the lives of our youth. Crime and violence is plaguing our communities. There is a need for more than just being aware of the issue. There is a need to talk about the issue and to find ways on how to address the issue. Why is it happening? Who are committing these crimes? The causes. What are the consequences of the issue? Who are affected? The effects. And most importantly, how can we help? The way forward. As always, St. John's College is willing to explore and collaborate with all stakeholders to talk about the issue and lead the way forward. Hence, we are grateful to our presenters for taking the time to educate us on the matter. As we address the theme, cause, effects, and the way forward, crime and violence among the youth of Belize, I ask you to listen attentively, to reflect, and to express your views on the issue. As Jesuit educators and Jesuit educated students, we are called to be agents of change. We all have a responsibility to make our community a better place. I invite you to listen attentively to the presentation so that you can become more informed about the issue and can actively participate in the discussion session which follows. Once again, I extend a hearty welcome to all who are present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Alvarado, for the welcome address. And we move forward into the introduction of our team for the Social Justice Forum for 2021. We invite Ms. Elizabeth Rangai, a law student from the Social Science Department, to share with us the team for this year. Ms. Rangai?
Good morning. Crime and violence has gradually become a prevailing evil within our country over the past 5 years. In the recent 8 months alone, we have either seen, heard, witnessed, or felt the aftershock as the media portrayed the lives of youths that have been taken away. These godless crimes and acts of violence that are being carried out by the youths of today's society has called us here to remember our promise as a Jesuit institution to journey with the youths and protect the marginalized. Today, as we embark on a series of talk under the theme, Causes, Effects, and a Way Forward, Crime and Violence in Belize, we remember also Shireen Cardenas, Dwayne Gabriel, and Casman Gill, all members of our SJC family who have been taken away as a result of this senseless violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth Rangai, for sharing the team and reminding us about how important it is and for letting everyone know that we have not forgotten our lost SJC students. At this time, we will call on Mr. Jason Kelvin, who will do the introduction of the presenters to the audience. Mr. Kelvin?
Good morning, everyone. Mr. William Dawson is a gang mediator and the director of the Wagner's Youth Facility. Mr. William Dawson is a former student of Lake Independent Methodist Primary School in the St. Martin's area of Belize City. He grew up on Santa Barbara Street and later moved to Fern Lane in the heart of what was eventually known as the PIV, or Peace in the Village Gang territory. He lived with his mom and his dad and has 3 brothers and 4 sisters, of which Mr. Dawson is the eldest. He lived with his mom and, Mr. Dawson was considered to be a very bright young man. He has passed either first or second throughout his primary school years up until standard 6, at which point he graduated as valedictorian. Mr. Dawson further pursued studies at St. John's College and attended up until 3rd form until he was later transferred to Gwen Lizarraga High School on the south side of Belize City. At that point, Mr. Dawson was at a place where his self-esteem was very low and he was confused with the hormonal changes he was experiencing and wanted to be a part of the hype group. On the way they now refer to the rehabilitation programs, they stopped calling them inmates and referred to them as interns once enrolled in the program. In 2017, Mr. Dawson was given a challenge by CEO of Virgilio Murillo to take over the directorship of the Wagner's Youth Facility, which is the area of the prison that houses all the juvenile inmates who are between the ages of 14 and 18 years old. At that time, Wagner's Youth Facility Wagner's Youth Facility was considered one of the most rogue parts of the prison. He told CEO Murillo that the only way he would accept the challenge was if they gave him full autonomy to restructure the facility and implement new programs. He agreed, and that was the beginning of one of the most epic journeys. Mr. Dawson had the help of his life coach and mentor ambassador, Atala Shabazz, whom he met in 2015. She has been one of the most influential and supportive people in his life. In 1 year, Mr. Dawson managed to turn the entire facility around and change the order of business at the Wagner's Youth Facility. The admin of the prison was pleased with the leadership of Mr. Dawson, and he won the Civilian of the Year award in 2018. It has been and still is one of the greatest achievements of his life. They have been able to make history by supporting the young men to sit their PSC exam, and eventually 2 of them received their high school diplomas from behind the prison walls in 2019. In 2020, they struck again with having 2 top finishes among 20 plus Cana online 4th form students. Mr. Dawson said that they boasted 1st place and 3rd place respectfully. Both young men moved on to enroll in tertiary education, where one is studying computer science and the other business administration on an online tertiary institution named University of the People. His life journey is geared toward proving that with the right support system, the passion and the will, they can change the mindset of young people who are suffering from low self-esteem, peer pressure, and those who suffer from PTSD or ACE, generational trauma, epigenic trauma, along with disorders, whether psychological or psychiatric. He also mentors children with behavioral issues in his spare time. He teaches part-time at Galen University, lecturing a class called Trends in Correction. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. William Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Kelvin. And before Mr. Dawson graces us with his presentation, I would just like to make a statement about the time for presentations. Each presenter has 15 minutes for this presentation. If you are going to be running, the timekeeper will let you know if you're running out of time. He will tell you you have 1 minute remaining in which you will have to wrap up your presentation. So Mr. William Dawson, we invite you to share your information with our students.
Hi, good morning. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Okay, I'm just checking. I had some technical difficulties before, but let me start off by saying I'm very happy to be a part of this discussion this morning, and I must say condolences to the entire administration staff and student body of SJC on recently losing a couple of your family members, because that's what it is. You actually lost members of your family. Cause effects and the way forward where crime and violence is concerned amongst our youths and beliefs is extremely prominent topic being discussed at this point in time. And so what are some of the causes and effects of crime and violence among the youths and beliefs? And my presentation this morning, basically, I try as much as possible to encapsulate what it is, because there's so much that we can consider that are causes and effects of crime and violence among our youths and beliefs. But some of the more prominent, we believe, are poverty, where there's extreme poverty in some of the areas that we refer to as Southside believes there is a tremendous amount of criminal activity and gang recruitment happening in these areas because of poverty and poor socioeconomic inclusion of young people. The next thing is poor parental support. When we talk about poor parental support, we're talking about mostly having young men coming out of single parent households, and what we've been able to ascertain is that Belize has what is called a matriarchal society. We have mostly single mothers taking care of young men who, in this case, on the south side of Belize, are lacking supportive father figures. And that is why they're looking around to see if they can join groups that give them that level of financial support and to get that level of mentoring from adult males. But in this case, where gang leaders are concerned, they are not good mentors. They're actually bad mentors to these young men. And trauma. Boy, we live in a country where mental health seems to not be our most prominent issue that we would want to address where health is concerned, and it is necessary because we have a population of people over the past 30 years, especially in Belize City, who have been suffering from traumatic experiencing, young children experiencing serious criminal activity at its highest level, the living conditions are bad, where many of these households abuse is taking place, and we're not really speaking out loudly about it because the culture is that you keep hush hush about these things. And so there's a great amount of trauma. And one of the things that you have to understand is that prisons, especially in this case where the Wagner's Youth Facility is that final stop for young people from the age of 12 that commit criminal offenses at a high level are sent to Wagner's by the courts. And so you hear through psychometric analysis or through us interviewing them and building rapport, you hear a lot of some of the incidents that cause them traumatic experiences, and they vary from, you know, physical abuse to sexual abuse. And we're talking about young males below the age of 18 years old getting abused and traumatized within their household and their families and circles that they living in these communities, and we don't know. And they lash out viciously when they get the opportunity for the lack of being able to address some of these issues. Next, we've noticed that there's a lack of educational opportunities. This, for the most part, might be because of the poverty and not being able to afford, but not being able to access the proper educational support system. Pretty much we've seen that the conventional academic system have failed most of these young men and women, whereby when assessed, they are not academically inclined, but when given alternative educational opportunities, for example, we use the kind of online high school program, the complete aided learning skills program. So, and the HL remote access community hotspot for education and learning. These are all computer aided learning skills program that they can access coupled with skills training. And so what these programs do is take away the conventional academic method and give them video programs in the form of games, puzzles, and that type of stuff. And we operate on the Howard Gardner philosophy of multiple intelligence, where we certainly move away from just the conventional methods of assessing them academically, and we find out what are their learning skills, the way how they learn. How do you learn? Some of them learn by listening, some learn by touching, you know, some learn by dancing, bodily kinesthetics, movement, and that type of stuff. But we have to take the time to assess, literally person to person, to figure out what is that person's learning style, and kind of coax them into getting on the program. And when they notice that the program is, there's no judgment, you know, we give them that support, that nurturing environment. We've seen great changes in them with their behavior and their cognitive development. Then there's a great old peer pressure, which is something that a lot of young people have to face, especially in these times where there's the bling bling and the fancy jewelry they wearing. That rap era, people are watching a lot of videos with these rap stars and want to live that lifestyle, and there's a pressure to access some of these things that will keep them in the popular groups. And so that in itself brings a great stress and challenge to the young persons. And even more so, the fact that you have to either be a part of the bullying group to survive through leaving school or coming to school or leaving these neighborhoods. You have to be a part of that group, or else you'll be targeted, is something that we really have noticed is a part of what contributes to the high speed of crime. Because many of these young men, when we get them one-on-one, really don't want to be a part of the criminal activity. It's just as if though they believe they don't have an option to do otherwise, and that's a major problem for us that we notice going forward. And then, of course, there's the great lack of morals and values within the households. These, of course, had to be things that were taught from the familial level, that are absent for the most part. And so looking at that, definitely there is a lack, and that's why at Wagner's we make sure we are big on discipline and on respect. Many of them are part of occult groups, by the way. They do satanic worshiping. They don't believe in God. They actually have rituals that they are a part of in their little groups. It's pretty bad. It's crazy. Some of it is even blood sacrifice related, and these are some of the realities that we are not paying attention to as it relates to the criminal activity happening amongst our young people in Belize. So I chose to share this quote from Frederick Douglass, and it says that it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And that, we believe, is the essence of what is happening now. And so some of the strategies that we've been using to deter youth from engaging in the crime and violence is a lot of intervention. We have to sit and talk to these children. We have to find out what it is that's going through their head. When we've noticed that we cannot take the approach of being condescending or speaking down to them. We have to come down and let them know we understand, we empathize, we know what it is that is their struggles, and certainly we're not judging them for their behavior. We know these children are not products of themselves, but rather the environments, the communities that they come from, the households. All of these things do take a toll on the behavior of the children. And so we have to be able to understand, like I said before, that we're dealing with traumatized children. We're dealing with children who have several issues that needs to be addressed. And so they need counseling, they need access to people who can listen and understand and assist them from a psychiatric or psychological perspective. Education is key. And we've noticed that at least 75% of the young men who come into the facility do not know how to read and write well. And this makes them very angry, by the way. When they can't read and write well, they become very angry and frustrated at everything. And so we've noticed, like I said, that once we tap into that part of their psyche, we've seen great improvement in their behavior and cognitive development. Employment and social inclusion seems to be one of the greatest factors because they seem to not be fitting in to the money-making circles. And this can be because of several reasons. Some of them, we believe it's because of their gang affiliation. They can't just go to work anywhere. Some of them because of a police record or committing a crime, that there's not equal employment opportunity for those who want to change. And so because of a lot of them have not been able to function in the conventional school setting, we think that skills training is very appealing to them. A lot of them like working with their hands, and they're very good at it. And what that does is teach them a skill to survive and get them trained at another level to be a part of another contributing factor towards improving their community. And so with that said, we look at the holistic approach where programmatic guidance is concerned and provide them with that safe space that is conducive for rehabilitation, and give them that opportunity to get the right counsel, the right counseling, the right environment for them to access educational opportunities and skills training, and look at life skills as a prominent part of that, teaching them emotional intelligence, sex and drug abuse, and these type of topics are topics that are necessary for them to be able to access, and that has been working very well. Here I'm showing some pictures for you. I don't know if you could see them clearly, but these are some of the things that we've been able to have the young men enrolled in. If you notice in the first picture on the top, my top left is a project that is a construction project that the guys love. Some of them really love doing construction. You know, they haven't had that opportunity to succeed in school. We've offered them the opportunity to attend construction classes. The second photo you see there, some of them love growing plants. Some of them are very, very, very in tune with growing plants. What we have been able to do is teach them the symbiotic relationship between human beings and plants. And so every person who comes to the facility has to plant a seed. And when they plant these seeds and they end up nurturing these seeds, I can tell you when I come to work in the morning, they're already up and they say, B, when is it that we're going to water a plant, sir? Because they need water. You know, these plants can't stay out there by themselves. So they build that relationship with the plants. And as you can see, we've been able to harvest a lot of bountiful crops from the projects that they have been doing. We give them welding and plumbing, electrical, all of these topics. But since COVID-19, there has been a reduction in terms of some of these programs, but we've had great success incorporating many of the programs in the computer lab using the technology that we've said before and using video programs. And those two young men in the graduation gowns were two first graduates that received their diplomas from behind the bar. That was a very proud moment for us here at the prison. Both young men were allowed to leave the prison at the time. Both remanded on murder to receive their diplomas. Okay, and although we get flanked sometimes because people are saying, okay, like, well, these guys need to get punished for their crimes, but remember, our job is not to judge them.
Excuse me, good morning, sir. You have a minute remaining.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, pretty much the Wagner's was a place that was designed because of the great overpopulation within the prison setting, where the youths were being housed with the adults, and a lot of them were being abused by older inmates. And so the Wagner's, Richard and Bobby Wagner donated a sum of money to the prison, to late John Woods at that time, for them to build a facility to house the youths. And that's how we have the Wagner's Youth Facility. So just to give you a brief description of what the picture is here, and I'm going to utilize a minute for you to observe these charts where you can see some of the charges and the ethnicity of some of the young men that we have at the facility. There's mostly Creole young men. 50% of them basically are here remanded for murder. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson, and I'm hoping that you will be able to share this presentation with us after, that we can be able to send to our students as well.
Certainly.
Very informative. We would like to call on our youth presenter, Mr. Braden Bradley, to continue the presentation on causes. Mr. Braden Bradley. You will have to stop sharing, Mr. Dawson. You'll have to go to the bottom of your screen and click stop share screen and just stop sharing.
I can't share screen because Mr. Dawson is still sharing his screen.
You have to click on the top, Mr. Dawson, where it says you're viewing Mr. Dawson's screen, and click on that to stop sharing. View options. All right, you got it. Mr. Braden Bradley, just for your information, you have 8 minutes for your presentation. 1 minute before your time is up, and if you're still speaking, the timekeeper will notify you. Go ahead.
Causes for youth in gang violence in Belize. By me, Braden Bradley. Firstly, I will explain the anomie theory along with its 5 modes of adaptation, and specifically we will focus on the innovative mode of adaptation and how and why it is used among our youths in Belize. Secondly, I will speak on an interview by supposed gang members who stated their views on how the government is not helping not just them, but the youths and individuals who grew up in the slums. In other words, areas that have poverty in a high level. Now, the unknown material by Robert K. Merton focused. There are 5 modes of adaptation that are conformity, innovation, retreatism, ritualism, and rebellion. Primarily, we are looking at the innovative mode of adaptation that is a method of how someone wishes to obtain their goals and ideals in life by using illegitimate means. For example, selling drugs, weapons, stealing, robbing, burglarizing, and fraud. These are alternatives many of our Belizean youths turn to in a time of uncertainty, especially if they have not completed at least high school, their parents don't have a job, and they are only seconds, minutes, hours, or days away from becoming destitute. Now you'll ask, why do they need to participate in these activities to gain money? Simply, they have no other option. Using the innovative mode of adaptation is the easiest way to survive in their jungle. However, partaking in such events lead them to become gang affiliates and participate in gang violence. Additionally, the primary reason to use illegitimate means is because legitimate occupations are not offered to the youth. The initial cause for this is the government not doing their part in supporting and assisting these needs. Supposed gang members has been called these past 2 weeks for interviews and to make peace. And during their interviews, they stated that the government is not providing for anything for the youths in Belize, thus neglecting the future. In this video that I am going to present, we will show the supposed gang leaders being interviewed and being asked numerous questions. And some responses from the supposed gang leaders are that you must do it the way you're growing up, which is you must be in gangs and you must do what these gangs offer you to do, the way how you are growing in your vicinity. And life is really difficult and only the superior is getting wealth, whilst the inferior remain in the slums with no enhancement for their place in society. Moreover, they implied that this process of gangsters being interviewed based on gang-related content has been held for many years and the violence only increases. Furthermore, the state of emergency, incapacitation, incarceration, and imprisonment boosts rage within them who are being abducted by these deterrents. Even more so, you'll hear the innovative mode of adaptation being used by them and the law enforcement ending any sales they may try to make from selling these items. I will now present that video.
Why join that life in the first place?
Sometimes I have to do it how you grow up. Nothing that I want to eat. Why should I go to school? Better I go there on the streets and eat. And that's what I cause it most of the time. Government not set nothing for we.
Is it hard to live the gang life?
They're very hard.
Then we want to happen, mommy, but life really difficult, and then the only the rich then they get rich, and we the right down in the slum, not go on for none of we know the youth when they talk about they not try do nothing for every minute they say they have mediation, they say they have this and that, but they do it but no results so tight. Then they do this for over 20 to 30 years, 20 to 15 years, I want to say. Then thing that happen between gang members and none of the politicians, they don't do nothing, they only come up with try, say they want to do it and only always say and give story. The story just not the work because the youth when they get young and nobody not got nothing to do.
They have a sweet for the sell weed. Everybody smoke weed. Big people in the system smoke weed. Yes, enough of weed though, hustling different.
Because the people they know they only the setting all when they do a set state of emergency set this set that and send with a jail. When they come out of jail, they just turn more monster. Nothing else there for you come out broke, you know. Remember every time they send you to jail, come out broke, you don't got no money, you don't got nothing, so your monster then have to get loose because you need to eat. Everything need to balance off back on the scale, need to set back straight. Once on scale off balance, you never work in a life.
Courtney Menzies, 7 News.
Now with that video concluded, I will now move on to my second portion, which will be the family. I have included 4 pointers that will indicate how bad parenting can attribute to delinquency. And my 4th pointer is going to be based on an analogy that I have placed together to show the correlation between the man and organs and the family and the man. We now look at the base for youth investing in gang violence, which is known as the family. The relationship between abuse and delinquency has been described as a cycle of violence and attributed to the notion that violence begets violence. Widom, 1989. In a family where children witness their parents abusing each other will influence a behavioral replication for that child. Within a household, there are values and norms that may either be developed traditionally, habitually, or randomly. Traditional family values and norms are practiced in past generations of a family and they send to the upcoming generation of that family. Habitual norms and values are those which are learned and adapted from the vicinity and environment of the family's dwelling. Random norms and values are these of which occur without intention but by natural causes. Specifically, the random norms and values are the ones that contribute to the delinquency of a child, of a youth. Here's an analogy of how bad norms and values can affect a child. Our mind is an organ, and just as any other organ in our body, it must consume a proper nutrition to survive. Even dead cells consumed by other cells in our body that are the phagocytes and lymphocytes. They can eat those cells and cellular debris and bacteria because it serves as antigens, and as an outcome, they are both later turned into antibodies. If you eat something that has the wrong nutrition, your organs will start to deteriorate and die. Likewise for a man. If you feed your mind negative concepts, it will not only consume it, but reveal it through action. Your mind must consume positive thoughts and constructive activities to stay healthy. Now that you've got that, let's look back at the family. Suppose a house that the family lives in is a body, and the family are its organs. Without the family, the house cannot survive. Parents cook for their children. However, their food isn't the only thing consumed. The parents' behavior and mentality within that household is also absorbed by the children. What is learned from parents is what children practice on others. So if you see parents quarreling, fighting, and abusing each other, the trait will be passed on to the children, and they will do what they see their parents are condoning. Widom, 1989, claimed that witnessing violence within the home yields consistent but modest relationship with delinquency. This logical remark can be proven with an article by Robert K. Ressler and Tom Schachman that studied
Excuse me, you have 1 minute remaining.
36 murderers. And now for mass media. We look at a prominent cause for youths being involved in gang members. I'm going to illustrate a video to show how our youth in Belize are cloning these negative influences by these gangsters and music who expose explicit content. Now this may seem horrendous and horrific, but let's bear it and let's get through it.
First, if I be the Mac 10, fire shut them rapid burst. Violate them and go down in the dirt. The boy drop flat, a chop bash rifle that shot him. Later on the news, the people them watching. The we see take up your gun clapping for all of the love chatting. Yeah, Rasta, we are the wickedest. No, we are the sickest. Rifle purport make boy catch syphilis. We bad and we know and we evil. And me dogs them crazy. Me evil no. Get me hunted. If a boy try run up him out thing on dead. Squeeze a bitch, I got my beat it pan ya. Load a big clip, me squeeze it pan ya. And if a boy
In another recording that has also been released to the internet, a group of young men can be seen in what appears to be a video shoot. They are also showing off several handguns. The extras on the set, presumably affiliated with one of the Belize City gangs, are emulating what has become a popular scene where weapons are waved in front of the camera.
For their sake,
These are my references from where I got my source and to support my ideologies and analogies and my information, and it shows the credibility of it. And I would like to thank all of you for listening.
Thank you, Bradley, for your informative discussion on causes of crime and violence among youth. I would like to ask Mr. Jason Kelvin Just to give you some bio for Mr. Braden Bradley and also to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Rihanna Schnarr. Mr. Kelvin, go ahead.
Braden Bradley, an 18-year-old law major who grew up within the gang areas such as George Street, Tiger Street, and Nurse Finley Crescent. His educational journey started off at Building Block Preschool, thereafter Holy Redeemer Primary School, St. John's College High School, and thereafter enrolling at SJC. He chose to present on causes for youth in gang violence because he is familiar with how these young men think and involve themselves in these terrific acts. He has many friends who live in these gang areas and some of them are a part of it. He wants the cause to be heard so that he can help make a difference in their lives by pointing out how they are influenced by negativity and that they are causing harm and pain to our society. Now, we have Ms. Rihanna Schnarr, our next presenter. Ms. Rihanna Schnarr is a positive psychologist, philanthropist, and yoga teacher. Ms. Rihanna earned a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology in London, UK, at the University of East London. She has experience as a therapist for adolescents in residential treatment centers for behavioral, psychiatric, emotional, and substance abuse disorders and concerns. She completed her 200-hour yoga teacher training at the Princeton Center for Yoga and Health in 2015 and her 500-hour RYTT at Sonic Yoga, New York City. She uses her knowledge of psychology to inform her yoga teaching and has led teen-centered yoga and trauma workshops. She currently stands as the Executive Director of Freedom and Change Beliefs, a nonprofit focused on working with the most vulnerable population across the country to develop positive coping skills, stress management, and enhanced well-being. She is pursuing her doctorate degree in clinical psychology from Alliance International University in San Diego, California. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ms. Rihanna Schnarr.
Thank you, Mr. Kelvin, and we invite Ms. Rihanna Schnarr to share her discussion with you. Ms. Rihanna, you do have 15 minutes, and your timekeeper will let you know if you're running out of time. Thanks, and go ahead.
I'll just share my screen. Okay, and how do I? Okay, so, like Mr. Dawson talked about, and Bradley as well, the effects of crime and violence on youth, a lot of it we're going to go through is based around trauma. So what we understand as childhood trauma is any trauma obtained before the age of 18 or during like development. So for some individuals, it might continue past 18. So the trauma that you experience as a child, this refers to any scary, dangerous, violent, life-threatening event that happens to you. This type of event may also happen as a result of seeing something or hearing about it from someone else around you, or knowing someone who's been hurt or injured or has passed away, as all of you have through this past year. So I'm just gonna share a little bit of a video. I have a few clips to go through, and I'll just fast forward to the part that's relevant. So this is a bit of a trigger warning. So just to be mindful, if you feel any emotion, you can always mute until I'm done with this one video. So this is just talking about some of the effects of childhood trauma. So I wish I could make it a little bigger. Can you still see? Yeah, okay.
Trauma is an overwhelming event. It takes away our safety. It creates a sense of helplessness. and it continues to affect our perception of our reality.
Some of the telltale signs of trauma are quite evident. Many of these symptoms, it's not that we don't see them, it's that we don't have the entire sort of picture of what trauma is. Inability to sleep or interrupted sleep, inability to focus on what's going on, really not able to attend to learning. Adults need to be aware of children who are exposed to violence and intervene early and stop it.
I don't like the environment that I stay in. People getting killed every day, drug deals, people getting snatched, raped, cut up.
Whether it is a child who witnesses violence or a child who is the victim, you can't be fearful and be able to live your normal life. You have to be able to think clearly, and when you're traumatized, you can't do that.
Violence continues then to affect the child and their perception of their community, of their family. The danger is right around the corner. And the brain gets wired to expect danger.
My dad started actually physically beating me to the point to where I'd go to school with covered in bruises. I don't know how many times I've been threatened to be killed by my own dad.
My brother got shot in the head. He ain't make it.
It makes you afraid at times. It makes you feel that, oh my God, you know what? I just lost a friend. I just lost a family member. It just makes you feel that, hey, I could die next. I could be the next one dead.
What trauma does is it triggers what's called the amygdala in the brain, which is our fight, flight, freeze center.
And it truly is a change in the brain and a change in the stress hormones that are flowing through the body.
All our brains have what we call alarm systems. Because the brain now has been wired for danger and it's triggered into this fight flight, we don't just get over a traumatic event. It continues to impact us.
I started hearing my mom scream in the middle of the night. And it got to the point where he started beating me and my sisters. I let my anger build up, didn't talk to anybody about it. When you hold everything aside, it's like a bomb and it's like you're ready to explode and just somebody push that last button.
Most kids who've experienced violence oftentimes have experienced multiple types of violence. In the kids we see, the average number of different types of violent trauma is 4. And so complex trauma then affects multiple areas of the brain because it's ongoing.
Maybe it's gang warfare, maybe it's drug use and abuse in the family, maybe it's domestic violence, maybe it's bullying at school. And if there is a layering effect of cumulative violence, it changes literally the DNA.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to share from that. Can we all see my screen again? Back in the PowerPoint, just a nod, okay. So I'm kind of focusing on the trauma because that is the one guaranteed effect that you're going to have growing up and living in a crime-ridden area. And it's also one of the things that will have the most lasting impact on who you become, the way you interact in the world. So unfortunately, trauma has quite a few long-term negative effects, and that includes behavioral and mental health difficulties. So notably, it encourages you to fall into patterns of old behavior. So you kind of move towards situations of violence or feeling like a victim because you're used to being very fearful. So you already have that victim mentality, or you're forced to be violent because that's the only way to survive in your community, or because, if you've ever heard that story that the child who is abused goes to school and he becomes the bully, it's that same idea that that's the only pattern of behavior that you know. And then it turns into impulsive behaviors. So smoking, using substance abuse, eating too much, causing obesity, and high-risk sexual behavior. So that's all impulse behaviors. And when your brain is wired to appreciate high-stress situations, you tend to put yourself into high-stress situations because you feel more familiar in that area. And then lastly, there's the emotional toll. So the unstable emotional and mental processing that happens from trauma, and that causes depression, academic difficulties, school dropouts, and suicide at times. So I'm going to keep going forward, but these are just the effects of trauma, and I just really wanted to illustrate this because trauma is it's a neurological change in the body. Oh, geez. So it's a neurological change, and it happens especially in youth. Where it does rewire the brain for the rest of your life. So the earlier you intervene on trauma and you get some more positive, once it comes back on, you get some positive interventions in, the better. And this is a little clip just on the
emotional effects of childhood trauma are well known, but new scientific research reveals that child's positive and negative experiences can shape and reshape the brain. Research suggests that the more a child witnesses violence, the more neural connections are created in regions of the brain that involve fear, anxiety, and impulsiveness, while fewer are created in regions that involve reasoning, planning, and behavioral control. The good news is the young brain is malleable or plastic, and fostering stable, supportive relationships can prevent or help reverse this damage, resulting in lifelong benefits for the child's learning, behavior, and overall health. So how can you help a child in your life? Just remember these 5 healing gestures. Celebrate them with a compliment or by applauding their efforts. Comfort them by staying calm and patient. Listen to them and show an interest in their passions. Collaborate with them by asking their opinions, and inspire them with new ideas. With these everyday gestures, you can help a child look forward to a bright future.
And that was just kind of the reverse side of it. So what we can do to mitigate some of these misconnections. And they talk about really simple things, collaborating, having simple conversations about new ideas. These really do impact the way that your brain grows. So we talked about social support and community building, being able to talk about situations that happen openly in the community. And if you are feeling certain emotions, you feel comfortable enough, at least with one relationship in your life that you feel supportive and stable, that can make the world of a difference going through situations. We talked about inspiring and collaborating on new ideas. So building new pathways in the brain. So it's not just constantly being stressed. You have different pathways of ideas and growth to look forward to. Building resilience by having dreams and setting goals for yourself. So building up hope to a better future and not just being stuck in the ways of the past or in the surroundings. So the people around you. And talking about what you've gone through, giving hope to the next generation of youth so who don't know that they'll get through it yet. So instead of instilling behaviors that will eventually lead to the same violence and crime, we want to encourage people to look at things differently. And doing that through youth and community building. So if you're an older youth and you're able to help a younger youth, then that's exactly what you have to do, right? And then developing skills to regulate stress hormones early on. And I'm part of the Rhythm of Change Belize, and we do yoga and mindfulness. And it seems very simple when you take it out of context, like changing your breathing and doing these yoga poses. It doesn't really make sense to how that can affect your brain, but it actually does tremendously because it works on your stress hormone and it allows you to regulate your amount of stress. So I'm going to share a little video, the last one. This is from the Wagner's Youth Hostel on the women's side. And it's just some of the work that's being done, and you'll hear they explain their behavior. And when you understand it underneath the scope of trauma, they're all symptoms of trauma. So they're all things that they're acting out on because of the trauma that they've been through in their life. So I'm just going to start here, I think. And it just plays for like a minute or two.
Thing that happens that you want to protect it.
And it is an opportunity that the young girls have welcomed. And as they explain, yoga has made a mark on their lives.
I kind of feel angry and everything, but then when I come to yoga, I just feel relaxing. Then every time I just go to the yoga and something about that.
Before I did yoga, I had an anger issue, and like, you know, I didn't know how to calm myself, control my anger and stuff like that. But since I did yoga and stuff like that and learned how to meditate, I could just sit down or go in my dorm, lay in my bed and just like, you know, concentrate on the stuff that they taught us in yoga, and it really helped a lot. Like, I noticed that I'm happier. I could do stuff without getting easily angry, you know, and stuff like that.
Women does like quarrel and thing, and women does like fight up with each other. But since Michelle and the other team come, we calm down and we get to work along with others.
I didn't know how to deal with people. But I know now, like if I go home or home and stuff like that, and I get a problem like with my aunt or a friend or, you know, somebody, I'll know how to control it. Sometimes we might be for ourselves and we think different. Negative thoughts will just come. Sometimes we want to harm our own selves, you know, like in different ways. Instead of thinking of harming ourselves, we either could, you know, use the method that Ms. Michelle and Ms. Ingrid and Ms. Jyoti teach us, you know, to calm ourselves and don't hurt ourselves. And it's also gonna help me when I come move from here too, because you know when I go out in the world now, it's be a not different environment from being here in the hostel. So that know that when I go in the real world now, I will be able to, you know, use the things that they have taught me, and maybe I could teach others too. But the girl.
So that's the end of this slideshow, and I just wanted to, I guess, for the last few minutes, talk on a few of those points. So. There's, at the end, she talks about not being able to talk to the people around her or interact. So that's one of the effects of trauma, not being able to have good relationships because you haven't been able to experience good relationships in your life. So you act out in that same way. Learning how to take a moment and breathe before reacting helps you to develop those same neural pathways that will change your brain in the same way that the trauma has potentially changed your brain and heal you on a deeper level. Being able to feel good about themselves and not want to self-injure. So that's a big thing with trauma. So we work on trauma to avoid generational trauma. So we avoid continuing on these cycles. So if you were abused by your family or your friends or your community, you'd hope that for the future, we can work to defeat these deeper generational trauma issues. So I'm happy to hear questions and have that conversation after. But for now, thank you.
Thank you, Mishna, for your information and for the videos about trauma. We will now ask our youth presenter to open her discussion. Mr. Jason Kelvin, would you introduce our presenter, please?
Next we have Miss Minette Beos. She's a 17-year-old criminal justice major at SJC who plans to pursue a law degree to become a lawyer. She's very passionate about the social justice forum because she's living and seeing the realities of injustices in our justice system. For this reason, one of her priorities is to become a lawyer so that she can help her community untangle the myriad of problems facing the justice system. She wants to use her voice to protect the youth of Belize. Ms. Minette Beos.
Good morning. My name is Minette Beos, and I shall be presenting on the effects of youth gang violence.
I would like to start off by thanking you for this great opportunity. As a youth and a SJC JC student, I'm grateful to speak on the serious matters affecting our country, such as the effects of youth gang violence. Firstly, lack of motivation. Growing up, I moved schools a lot. At one point, I attended a school that was deemed as a ghetto school due to its location. I would see many of my peers go to school simply because their parents forced them to. And all they would do at school is be delinquents or have fun and socialize. But when it came to academics, they would perform poorly and they wouldn't really show any interest. Every child growing up in that community either had a close family member or a friend who was a part of a gang or was in jail because of violence or gangs. Because of this, they knew that as soon as they graduated from primary school, they had no future. They knew that their parents wouldn't be able to afford college. So why should they care about school? Seeing that their role models were mostly gang affiliated or were in jail, they had no motivation, no ambition, and they had no drive to continue school. And this can clearly be seen in their academic performance. It can be seen in their comportment and behavior towards school. Actually, a study conducted by IDB proves how 30% of our youths who are gang affiliated and attend school have low grades, or they simply gave negative feedbacks about school. 76% had dropped out of high school at some point. It is saddening to see how our youth get so affected due to their community and how it is so gang ridden that they feel they have no motivation or they have no way out. Secondly, poor self-esteem. Furthermore, poor self-esteem refers to those who have little confidence in themselves or they simply feel unloved. Being subjected to so much violence when you are just developing your cognitive skills along with your learning skills and moral compass is very dangerous. Creating a toxic environment where all they know is gangs can definitely impact their self-esteem and how they think of themselves. Thus, this limits their interactions in social settings, but especially in schools. Quiet children or kids at school are usually known as children who are subjected to violence or constantly suffer from violence because they have no interaction with other students. And as we know, self-esteem can be built through peer interaction because we share common interests and we are able to play, we are able to have fun, and we are able to socialize. But if they have no contact with anyone and worse at home, then they have no way to improve this self-esteem. In 2017, statistics show that 7.7% of our youths have no friendly interaction with other students. Consequently, this allows mental illness to flourish. And I go to my third point, mental illness. In addition, according to Belize Adolescent and Youth Health Country Profile posted in 2017, our youths have an ongoing issue with mental abuse. An astonishing 14.7% of our youths have seriously thought about killing themselves, and 13% have attempted to take their life. By nature, we know violence carries trauma. Whether the youth committed the violence, witnessed the violence, or was a victim of the violence, they carry some sort of aftershock or trauma from that violence. This allows mental illness to flourish, such as depression and anxiety, but it can also be seen physically through poor hygiene or eating disorders. A study actually shows that 35.8% of our youths battle with obesity. And this is serious because it can be seen how many of our youths suffer with mental illness day to day because of the youth gang violence they are suppressed to. Number 4, substance abuse. Moreover, gangs are known for dealing with drugs. Youths involved in gangs, violence or gangs overall have to deal with these drugs as well. And because they are exposed to so much violence on a day-to-day basis, then an escape for them could be to use the drugs in order for them to forget, or for them, or as an alternative to forget what had happened or what they did. And just by taking a blunt or taking a sip of the alcohol can lead to substance abuse. Those who are victims of youth gang violence can also want to forget what had happened. And because youths are seeing that drugs or alcohol is a way for them to forget what they had done, then they may be subjected to using it. And as you can see here, I've posted statistics that had been conducted in 2017 here in Belize, where 67.2% of our youths binge drink, 12.3% are avid tobacco users, and 3% have been introduced to cocaine. 24.3% are avid users of marijuana as well. It is saddening to see how prominent substance abuse within youths is in Belize, and how a main contributor of this is gangs. Number 4, rebounding. The most dangerous of them all is rebounding. 1.5% of our youths are currently in juvenile detention. Imagine 14-year-olds serving time due to heinous crimes they committed. Since they were in gangs and they are constantly in gangs, they see violence every day. And especially if they have been sent to juvenile detention, they feel that their reputation has been ruined or tarnished. And for this, they may feel they have no future or no way out. Because of this, they are subjected to rebounding, to going back to the gang, to continue doing what they have been doing, even though this means that they might end up in jail or back in juve. This is the only life they know and the only life they'll continue to know. And this will definitely create a chain reaction. Right here, I put a map that shows how prominent gangs are within the area of Belize City. A survey was conducted in Belize City where they asked youths around this area what they think about gangs. And 43% of the total 74% that were gang involved said that they believe that their fellow peers or gang members may die due to gang violence. Imagine youths already thinking about that, already thinking that their fellow friends or gang members may already be dead because of so much violence happening within their area. This is a serious issue which Belize needs to face. Youth are the future of the country, so we need to save those who are victims and continue to be victims of gang violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minette, for your information on the effects of crime and violence on the youths of Belize. I was quite intrigued with all of the data that you shared with us, and that it was very relevant to what we have seen here today. At this time, we would like to open our question and answer segment. But before we do so, I would like to invite Mrs. Rosel Brasenio and Ms. Rosalinda Reyes, who will be the question and answer moderators. And I will share with you how we're going to do this. You can ask your question via the chat. Please write the question in the chat. The moderators will view the question and please state who you're asking the question to. If you would like to verbally ask your question, please make that known in the chat as well, so that they can call upon you to let you ask the question. Please note that if your question has already been asked, it will not be asked again. So let us put in new questions into the chat group. So 1, you write your question in the chat. 2, state who you are addressing the question to. 3, if you would like to verbally ask the question, you may do so, or if you want it and if you want the moderator to ask it, leave the question there. Okay, so Mrs. Briceño and Mrs. Reyes, you will be taking charge of the chat for questions. So the segment is now open for you to have an actual discussion and ask questions from the presenters.
Good morning, guys. I just put in the chat the things that Ms. Marcia said, so it's easier for you guys to remember. So we have our first question from Pedro. It says, out of the 6 causes you stated for violence among youths, which one would you say is the main cause? And I'm guessing this one is for Mr. William.
Yes, certainly the poverty is the main cause. Not to say that any one of them is the least relevant, the most prominent, but poverty definitely is one of the root causes of the entire malfunction of the communities, because remember the issue is from within the household. That is where it first spirals from. And so definitely the lack of finances plays a key role in all of what is happening in terms of the youth recruitment in gangs.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson, and thank you, Pedro. Next, we have Fabian. You'd like to ask a question to Mr. Dawson. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Dawson.
Good morning, sir.
Sir, as it relates to the mitigation strategies that you was discussing earlier, I want to know, how do you guys at Wagner's facility are preparing the interns to adapt to the new world? You know, you guys are doing a lot of interventions, counseling, and many things like that to help with the development of the youths. But how are you preparing them to adapt to the outside world? You know, they are in a system, and you know, in the world, in this world, you know, people will discriminate. So I want to know, like, how are you preparing them to face all those challenges so they do not go back to square one?
Very interesting question. Remember, the youths aren't really incarcerated for long periods of time. Only the ones who are remanded for murder are actually in the prison for around 2 to 3 years before they get bailed out. And I can tell you there's some of them who are remanded because of the programmatic guidance and the behavioral improvement, because youths are going by the Beijing rules. And so there's a different classification for young persons who are incarcerated. We cannot have them in prison for long periods of time without it being further a contributing factor to the erosion of their psychiatric framework. So we have to be very strategic, and one of these things we've noticed is to build up on emotional intelligence support and that counseling and psychiatric support system for them because of the trauma that was inflicted on them. And so there has to be a comprehensive support system. I can tell you this much, that we've noticed over the past 4 years that the boys operate well within the framework of the Wagner's Youth Facility in the prison setting. But when they're released, we've lost 14 of them to gun violence over the past 4 years. 14 of them were literally killed in the streets, because it's like the analogy I use is to take the dog outside of the flea-infested kennel and clean the dog and end up putting him back in that flea-infested kennel. That doesn't make any sense. So the Leadership Intervention Unit that I'm the chairman of is a group that is looking at a collaborative approach, a multi-agency approach, where there are several stakeholders involved. So the Community Rehabilitation Department, I can tell you, is one of the primary agencies, along with the Department of Youth Services, because there has to be this cohesion and marriage between these departments to facilitate an adequate support system to allow the continuity of the rehabilitation of these young men when they leave. We can't just throw them out there because it's making no sense. And so that's a part of a discussion that is happening presently.
Thank you very much. And I guess as a follow-up to that, Nisha's question is asking, how does that service plan to uphold the solutions such as the interventions and skill training in the future?
Again, like I said, it's a collaborative approach, and I must mention that one of the things that was lacking is a political will. And we've seen that Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Karim Musa, is somebody who is extremely switched on in this regard. I don't think in recent years I've seen a minister so switched on in terms of trying to figure out how it is that we can mitigate the issues being faced amongst our young people where crime and violence is concerned. And also the Minister of Youth and Sports, Mr. Kevin Bernard, and the Minister of Human Development, Honorable Dolores Balramas Garcia. And like I said before, for these things to work, there has to be the political buy-in. Nothing can't work, especially in the political directorate in our country believes it has to be backed by politicians, unfortunately. And what we're hoping is that all the stakeholders see your institution is a stakeholder, because you are having a discussion that is necessary for your students to be aware of the reality that they're facing. One of the disconnects in most cases is that I will tell you the truth is that many of our citizens really don't understand the dynamics of what happens in these South Side communities. Yes, they hear there's a South Side, but the truth is that some people who don't live in those communities don't really understand the reality of living in poverty. Hearing stories of a family of 7 or 8 children having to share one ramen noodles with a half pack of bread is a part of our reality that we have to face. And these things have to be taken into consideration, that we're dealing with children who have never experienced how it actually feels to live a normal childhood. And these are things that we have to look deeply and closely into going forward if we want to remedy the situation. So the sustainability has to be supported from every aspect of the community at large, and all departments, civil society, business community, as well as the political directorate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dawson. I love the fact that you say, that we all have a part to do in an effort to try to improve the situation in our country. Moving on to the next question that we have here. Would you have a number, about point figure, as to how many inmates have a high school diploma?
Are you talking about Wagner's or the entire prison?
The question does not specify right here, but the entire prison.
Okay, I really don't have that stats on me right now, but I can tell you the number is extremely small. It's a very, very small percentage. When we look at the statistics overall where literacy is concerned, I would say at least 65 to 70% of the inmates that, who are incarcerated are illiterate. They can't read and write. So that's to give you a pretty good picture of what it is in terms of literacy. And so a high school diploma in this setting is something of an anomaly. And that is why we're big on education in terms of rehabilitation.
Okay, we have another question right here, again from Mr. Dawson. It's for you. It says, is there anything that we can do to alleviate the crime problem as a students?
Definitely. I love that question, because when we talk about collaboration and stakeholder involvement, students are a stakeholder themselves. We have seen in Belize where there's a lot of time and effort, especially in the media, where people are more looking towards seeing who died in the newscast, and where students are concerned. There are a lot of young people who are doing great things that are not being highlighted. And so students need to look at their student association within these schools and start looking at ways how they can. I know we partnered on St. John Berkman Day with St. John's College, where students have been brought to the prison to interact with the young men at the Wagner Youth Facility. And that is the kind of social inclusion that needs to be happening so that we can bridge that gap. Because when these young persons from St. John's College met the young persons at Wagner's Youth Facility, there was no barrier. They were all young people together associating and trying to have fun, minus the criminal intention of those who are at Wagner. So young people across the board have a lot of things in common when you take away those criminal intent that some have, but you'll never be able to tell if we are stigmatizing the group that is giving the trouble and that are crime involved or related. So a part of their rehabilitation is to include them in social activities and involvement with normal young people. That's a different type of peer pressure now when you're with a bunch of young people who are doing well and doing good things. So I'd love to see many more schools look at those type of models where the students go into the communities and interact with young men that can be identified as medium or high risk or vulnerable, in any case, young men and women.
Excuse me, guys, just a little reminder, please put your questions in the chat since we're following that order in order to be fair to everyone, okay? And I just want to go to a question that we kind of overlooked that was there. That was from Ms. Rihanna, which is, under strategies for youth, how does one build resilience through dreams? Is it by setting goals?
Yeah, so resilience is the ability to handle and overcome adversity. So I like to think about this in connection with hope, because there's no real guarantee that you'll be able to handle what life throws at you. It's just the hope that we have, and that's what keeps the resilience alive. And then goal setting in conjunction with that is just the reason. So it can be the reason for hope. Setting a goal helps you create a step towards the future that you'd like. So it encourages you to continue to hold on through the adverse time. If that answers your question. Yeah.
I see another question right here directed at you, Ms. Rihanna. It reads, how can you give a 10-year-old boy hope for the future when he questions his own life, especially after the death of Dwayne Gabriel?
So for this one, I think the most important thing is to be that supportive relationship, and that's being able to talk to him, but also being able to listen to them. Most people want to live, so in their own thought process, if they're able to tell you about what they're going through, they'll come to a realization that they do want to live, but they also want to feel that someone else understands that there's fear and they're not alone in that fear. And to encourage, again, a goal, give them something to look forward to and to push towards, so that they have small steps every day to kind of mediate what's happening in other ways in their life. So listening and talking, just being that supportive person.
Thank you, Ms. Rihanna. Moving on with our questions right here, Mr. Dawson. It reads here, as part of a solution, you said you are training the youth in skill training. Are you aware if they are able to adapt to the outside world after being released? Is there anything that is done to help them get a job? I think you are muted, sir.
Sorry, excellent question. These are not things that I'm afraid or ashamed to tell you that we have been missing. And I think this is the time for us to look at realistic picture of creating an environment for our young people to succeed. We have not been keen at all, not even with our young people, but overall with inmates or people who have committed infractions in society. So once been given that skill, that needs to be coupled with an environment that you're able to be able to utilize the skill. And so we'd have to look at a marriage, like I said, with the business community, with other stakeholders to provide employment for these young men, to give them a chance. We've not been adequately involved in giving meaningful opportunities to be alternative to what these young men know. So a lot of, and I'm going to tell you this frankly, a lot of people in Belize have been involved in skills training and educational opportunities who are not gang involved or criminally involved, who really don't have opportunities to exercise their skills and training. So we have to look at the reality going forward of how we look at social inclusion as a people, and refrain from stigmatization or stigmatizing people who are trying their best to move in a different direction. I can tell you this much: the other day, the gangs, a couple of the factions came to the media to say that they want to encourage each other to do a truce and to denounce the killing of Dwayne Gabriel. And immediately the public say, oh, they're faking. They're not serious about it. And these things are not healthy, because what if they are? I mean, I'm just saying, what if they are truly serious about it? There's no room for it. And so we really have to look at how we look at framework to allow safe spaces for these young persons to be able to practice these skills that they learned while they were incarcerated or in programs. We don't want to only focus on those who are incarcerated. We want to look at prevention programs as well to avoid young people to get into trouble, because what we can see right now, the model that we are using, is that the only time you get the real treatment that you need is when you commit a criminal offense and get sent to prison. That's not supposed to be. Okay, we have to look at preventative programs and programs while you're incarcerated and programs after you leave, if that's the case. So it's a whole new framework we're looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. The other question is for Mr. Bradley. And the question says, since lack of financial support and a lack of help from the government that increases the cause for youth gang violence, what would be a solution to stop gang violence?
Well, for the community leaders, what I've seen so far is that they are begging for jobs, not for just them, but the youths who are affiliated with them. And I remember that 4 years ago, there was a gang peace walk, and some foreign woman had been there to lecture them how to manage a company and how they can get a job. However, they weren't offered any jobs. They were offered certificates. And also, there are many buildings, many governmental buildings that can be painted by these gang members, and the government can do that for them and provide money for them in exchange for their work. And also, Brandon Baptist was awarded a grass cutting machine on news, and just as how he was awarded that, they can give each gang affiliate or community leader one of those types of machinery to assist them to have a job.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. And then I'll move over to this question that does have who it's directed to, and it's from Ms. Veos and Ms. Schnar. So then we can have Ms. Veos go first and then Ms. Schnar. And then the question says, do you think legalizing marijuana in Belize would influence the deterring of crimes, since the gang members see it as a coping mechanism for trauma or mental health? Ms. Veos?
Miss, I believe that it would not deter crime. Rather, it would decrease the amount of incarceration rates, because marijuana is very popular in Belize. It is a drug constantly used and grown. So incarceration rates would go down, but it would not stop the crime that is happening in Belize.
Thank you very much, Ms. Veos. Ms. Rihanna?
I think that it could have a positive effect on the deterrent of crimes in Belize, because currently it stands as a crime in itself. And a lot of what the negatives come out of the use of marijuana is not the use of marijuana, it's the criminality of marijuana. So the money that's made on the black market and the violence around the procuring of drugs over borders and things like that. So it's not so much the drug itself, because there are medical benefits and there are not medical benefits, there are disadvantages. Definitely there's disadvantages, but that works on a personal level. I think on a social and societal level, the crime of the drug is bigger than the drug itself. So I think with legalization, it would definitely help to deter a lot of the war on drug crimes that we see through gang affiliation, and a lot of the money that comes in through gang affiliation with selling.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Dawson. It reads, if we now know the causes and effects, how do we help the people in the community before they grow up and begin to associate with these gangs? How do we begin to stop the problem before the damage is done to our youth and people?
Yeah, I'm getting some very good questions. Definitely, crime and violence is a part of every society. Belize is not unique in any way to this anomaly of crime and violence. But we do have a unique culture here in Belize whereby we have not seen extreme violence in terms of revolutionary actions and rebellions in terms of civil wars. What we do have is street gangs, pretty much, I believe, who are disorganized, but resourced with weaponry. And so only a handful of these young men who are committing violent acts can be seen as sociopathic in their tendencies. The others are under peer pressure, like I said. So we would have to look at this collaboration seriously, look at what it is that each stakeholder brings to the table. For example, there's the churches on board. What role does the churches play in the equation? There's the Ministry of Human Development that has the social services, the community rehabilitation department, who have what you call community rehabilitation officers and social workers, who are tasked with finding out what is happening in these households, in these communities. We have to look at a national assessment where we are getting data on what's happening in the household, who's working, what are the age groups, who's attending school, who's not. And hold parents pretty much accountable under the rights of a child. We're seeing that there's this disconnect where parents are concerned with their children, and I have been at the forefront of hearing things like, Mr. Dawson, I don't want to hear about him, I've tried with him, he's your baby now, he's in prison, and having to coax parents back in a relationship with their children. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, because coming up, I won't lie to you, I got smacked upside the head if I committed an infraction in my household where my mom or dad is concerned, and that's just the model that we were afforded in a younger Belize. But no, it seems that if those parents have lost that control over their children, and in many cases it's because the breakdown is happening from what the children are seeing as children living in a household where there's rogue activity happening. So there's no control across the board. So we have to hold parents accountable and make sure that we are identifying the most vulnerable households that are really breeding this type of criminal behavior. From children are very little, we're teaching them to curse out adults. We're teaching them to smoke drugs. We're teaching them to drink rum and how to hustle and live a gang lifestyle. And a lot of this is because of generational trauma. We have communities on the south side of Belize that for years have successfully been breeding gang members from generation to generation. It might sound crazy, but your grandfather was a gangster, or your dad was a gangster, and both of your grandfather and your dad got killed, and now your vision is to be the new evolution of this group as a gangster. And the truth is that I tell most of them, you're going to get killed as well. That's how it is, you know, or go to prison for a very long period of time. So to just answer your question is we have to target these households and most vulnerable families as we go forward.
Mr. Dawson, with reference to the mitigation strategies, how effective have these been with regards to deterring recidivism among the interns?
Honestly, it's been working well. Like I said, with minimal resources, of course, we have seen improvement. But when you measure the amount of successes to the amount of the young men who are dying, it's really not showing that there's much that we've been doing to impact it on a higher scale. So I believe truly that if we have been fully invested in creating that safe space, that place that there can be that support system for these young persons, we would have seen tremendous success, because it's only 1 out of 10 young men that come to the wilderness, like I said, are showing real violent tendencies and uncontrollable behavior. I'm sure you've not heard of anybody getting killed at the wilderness youth facility. I'm going to knock on wood. Since we have taken over 4 years ago and have changed the model and structure of how the facility is being run, where officers are not brutalizing the young men or mistreating them, there is a quite a nurturing approach for them to be able to feel safe, because they live in an open dorm setting. I encourage people to come and see what we're doing, because all of these young men, right now my count is 21 young men at the facility, and we have 13 of them remanded there for murder, and they live in a dorm setting representing these different gang infested neighborhoods. But when they're here, we don't give them space to practice that gang lifestyle and that culture. So they are more their brother's keeper when they're here. It's all about having the right approach and opening that door, like I said, where there is the right nurturing environment that is conducive to rehabilitation. They can't smoke behind here, they can't drink, we monitor their calls, so it's not like they can really get influence from some of their subordinates on the outside. So it's actually and we're trying to mend the family setting back together while they're here. So like I said, with the right support, with the right resources, I'm pretty sure, I guarantee we can see an improvement.
Thank you very much. And we're almost at the time, so we have time for one last question to Ms. Schnarr. The government overlooks mental health rather than addresses it. Since childhood trauma is one of the emphasized effects of crime and violence amongst youth, is there any specific facility or procedures that you strongly believe should be put in place by the government to help address and potentially deter this effect amongst youths?
Yeah, so again, as I said earlier, and I'm just going to push it because I do represent Rhythm of Change Believes, and we do push for mindfulness, meditation, breath work, yoga to be put into schools and at a very early age, just so that there is an awakening of the internal self, in the sense that you can regulate your own breath if you're in a very stressful situation. We really teach kids very straightforward: when you're in stress, this is how you should breathe, and not just through your chest, but in through your nose down to your belly, fill up your whole chest. It makes a big difference to learn these processes early on, because the earlier you get involved in changing the neural pathways, the better it is, the less patterns they've already got accustomed to repeating. So definitely getting mental health in that way, even if it's not through the mindfulness, yoga, meditation format, but through mental health in another way, through counselors going into schools and dealing with kids at an early age, especially kids that are already showing signs of delinquency. You can probably trace that back to their home life, and you can't change their home life, but you can start to change how that child reacts to their home life. And to tell them that this isn't a normal situation, that there is other possibilities for social interactions, and instill hope early on.
Thank you, Ms. Schnarr and Mr. Dawson, for answering the questions. Ms. Marcia?
Thank you so much, presenters and students. This has been a very vibrant and lively discussion. I am sure that we may be able to invite you all back for another question and answer segment portion because students still have a lot of questions left in that chat box. And so if you all are willing to continue the discussions, we can talk after the session to see when we can do this so that we can provide some more guidance and collaboration. I believe that this has been healthy for us all in hearing the information firsthand from you, Mr. Dawson, and from Ms. Schnar, and also from our youth presenters who have been able to research the topics and provide us with the data that they have found, and also from Mr. Bradley, who can give you firsthand information about, life in certain environments. And so the real life and the reality of what is happening today is important for us to continue this dialogue. Before we close off, we would like to invite Ms. Elizabeth Rangai to do the closing and the thank you for our session. Ms. Elizabeth.
Hi again, everyone. It is my great honor to say thank you to all our presenters here today. We really appreciate each and every one of you coming to take the time out of your busy schedule to share not only your knowledge, but your thoughts with us. We would like to say thank you to Mr. William Dawson, Miss Ariana Schnar, Mr. Braden Bradley, and Miss Lynette Vales. We'd also like to thank our college administrators, our staff, and faculty, and of course, the students, each and every one of you who tuned in today, asked questions. We really appreciate those. It is important for us to be a part of the annual SJC Social Justice Forum. It is a very important matter that is being dealt with or currently going on in our country. We would like to invite you to stay tuned to these programs that we are hosting. We are inviting you back with us next week on October 19th. So please tune in.
Thank you, Ms. Rangai, and thank you for sharing with our students that the discussion does not end here today. The discussion continues. We're hosting another segment of the Social Justice Forum, The Way Forward, next week, Tuesday at 11. And you will be given the same type of information and be afforded space to ask your questions and for you to dialogue with presenters. And so again, tune in with us next week, and we thank you all for being a part of the Social Justice Forum 2021. Have a great day, and thank you for joining. Ms. Aisha, you can close off with the school song, please.
Field, may victory ever crown with glory. might, as well as right, is up the path before us. Let our voices loudly ringing, cheer on cheer in actions ringing, rend the heavens with our singing. Hail the white and blue.
Thank you and goodbye, everyone.